My name is Greg Evans. I am Director of African American Student Programs here at Lane Community College. I've been here about 14 years. A little bit of my background is on the cover sheet of the handout that I've given you. The title of the workshop today is Post-Racial America: What is the Status of the Dialogue Over Race? Excuse me. What I want to do today, and I will get into this in just a minute as we start the presentation, is to get into a presentation and then a conversation about what the real true dialogue is about race in America right now. As all of us know, we have a new president of the United States, and for the first time, that individual is an African American. Barack Obama. One of the reasons why I developed this workshop, and I actually began developing this workshop before Barack Obama was elected, and going back to the Democratic Convention in Denver a year ago. If some of you can remember, if you watch cable news or read the newspapers, and it's been all over the internet and every place else, there is a new term that has been coined called post-racial America. It is supposed to be a signal for a paradigm shift in our country from the civil rights movement to an era in which we are over civil rights. Okay? We don't have to think about civil rights anymore. We don't have to worry about civil rights. We have achieved some semblance of closure in terms of the conversation on civil rights. That's what the media would lead you to believe right now. That's what a lot of the pundits want to lead every one of us to believe. And that's what some intellectuals right now are having this conversation about this issue right now. It is forming what we call a new movement in America, a post-racial movement. Now the question is, what does this have to do with peace? It has a lot to do with peace, and I'll get into that just shortly. But what I like to do, since we're kind of a close group here, is to kind of do some introductions. So if everyone can kind of just give me your name, and give the group your name, and also the reason why you're attending this workshop today, that would be great, and then we'll get started into the body of this. So, go ahead.
My name is Kyle Jones. A lot of the reason I'm attending this workshop is to write a story with the Torch newspaper for one, but also my personal thoughts and to get a better understanding of post-racial America.
My name is David Cobb, and I chose this particular workshop because I think that the issue of race is still the open wound, that we can't create a new society if we don't actually address race in a real and meaningful way. And there are very few opportunities to talk about race in an honest way in this country, and especially as a white person. And just real quick, like I come from grinding rural poverty myself, and I will admit right up front that I used to always say, man, I wish women and people of color would just like get over gender or get over race and really understand that it's capitalism, it's the economic system, that's actually what they're doing to us all. And I'll never forget that I was too smart to actually say that out loud, because I knew that black folk or brown folk or women, how they would react. I finally had a chance to have a woman of color that I was close enough to say that, and I'll never forget her telling me, I wish you could hear that, David, because I know what you think you're trying to say, but the words in my head are, Serena, you don't matter. You don't understand how things really work. And in a nutshell, she said, have you ever thought that the reason you think class is the only thing that really matters is because that's your identity, and that other people's identity are equally valuable? So in a nutshell, like what I'm trying to do is grapple honestly with my own thinking.
Well, thank you for that, because I think a lot of people still kind of have this belief in this subset that, you know, we're just kind of all victims of the system. And we are victims of the system, but we're victims of the system in different ways. The system has impacted us disproportionately, and I'm going to talk about that just right now. Go ahead, Beth.
I'm Beth Haglott, and I'm here in this workshop, this particular one, because I'm grappling with this. And I've learned a lot from Greg over the last bunch of years and want to continue to, because I think you're right, it's the open room. It's the thing we're still struggling with. It's not post.
I'm Marion, and I think there has been some increased openness with Obama's election for different reasons, and I'm really fascinated to go further in the dialogue. I think it totally enriches our culture to hear from all the facets, all the many backgrounds.
I've got personal and community reasons for being here. I'm on board with Oregon Country Fair. We just are really trying to start off our own diversity consciousness work within our community. And I've lived here almost all my life. I lived here long enough that I was here when there were crosses burned in the city. And
Oh, there are still crosses burned in Oregon. We're going to get to that.
yeah.
Yes.
I'd like
Just
to
recently, last week.
Rachel, but I can see we've got a long way to go.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank everyone for, sharing that with us. What I'd like to do is kind of get into this real quickly and kind of give you an overview of what this workshop is going to address. We're going to address the question of what is a post-racial America, the real impact of Barack Obama's election as President of the United States. Is the civil rights movement dead? Which is a big question. The myth of a post-racial America, which kind of tips you off to where this is going. What is the status of the racial divide? And I'm going to get into that shortly. And then kind of the organization of the workshop. What is a post-racial America? Post-racial America is what I would consider a fabricated term, a fabricated concept that has not yet fully been developed or vetted in this country. What has happened is this is a knee-jerk reaction among intellectuals, among people who are in the media, and generally folks in general, to kind of say to everybody, wow, what is this? What does this election of Barack Obama mean in this country? Have we arrived? Has the dream come true? And in a lot of sense, we have. There are parts of this dream that is coming true. Because I'm going to tell you very quite frankly, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, a year ago, I did not believe this man could be elected President of the United States. So the real question is how did this happen and why? Well, the biggest issue is that George Bush and Dick Cheney screwed this country up royally. And usually, my godfather was Carl Stokes. I come from Cleveland, Ohio, and he was the first African-American elected mayor of a major American city when he was elected mayor of Cleveland in 1967. My grandmother was a ward leader, so we were involved in politics. My mother worked on the campaign, actually several of Carl Stokes' campaigns. And then later, when I was a teenager, I ended up in my early 20s working on Carl's campaign for municipal court judge when he came back to Cleveland after many years of being in New York as a broadcaster. And I remember him saying to me one time this, and I never forgot this. I said, how did you get elected in 1967? He said, 2 reasons. He said the city was getting torn up. Things were bad. In Cleveland, as you might know, from about 1965 till about 1968, 69, there was a series of race riots in this country, mostly in the urban areas. Cleveland had 3 significant race riots. The Huff Riots of 1966, which was in central east side of Cleveland. The Glenville Riots in 1967, which one of my relatives was part of starting. He was a member of a black nationalist group called the Afro Set. And then in 1968, immediately after Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in April of that year. So there were three major deals. But during this time, the '66 Huff riots had left some real indelible marks on not only the African American community, but the white community in general. People's foundations were shook, okay? We had come to a point now where there had been so much poverty, so much discrimination, so much racism with people being discriminated against, attacked by the police department and other parts of society, folks not having access to jobs, health care, etc., that all of these things boiled to what became a tipping point. And the tipping point became a confrontation with the police, black youth, bam, the whole city started going up, or that part of the city started going up. And so the second thing he said to me was, white folks will never give this city up until they give up on the city. And basically, that's true. And I said, explain that to me. I was a teenager. I was a kid when all that stuff happened. And he said, in 1965, he ran for mayor. I remember a little bit of it. I was about 4 years old. And my mother was in that campaign as well, and my grandmother too. And he came very close to winning. He lost that election to a guy by the name of, who was he? Ralph Locher. Really, unremarkable man, to say the least. And the reason why he didn't make it in '65 was because people still cared about Cleveland, okay? They hadn't given up on Cleveland. By 1967, after the '66 riot and the summer of '67, that riot, people had started to give up on Cleveland. There was white flight that was just absolutely out of this world, tremendous. I can tell you that from personal experience. My father was a blockbuster. He bought a house, first man to buy a house east of 154th Street in Cleveland, first black man to do that. Excuse me. 1959. Within 5 years, our neighborhood was all black. It had been a Czechoslovakian, a Hungarian neighborhood. Everybody ran to the west side to Parma. Okay, they went over to the suburbs of the west side. So they got all the way on the other side of town to get away from us. And then he said to me, I said, why are you saying that? Who gave up on Cleveland? He said the rich and the powerful and the media and the whites in Cleveland had basically thrown up their hands and said, we can't deal with this anymore. It's time for us to get another representative, and Carl Stokes, you're going to be it, because we can no longer tolerate the community be A, torn up, but B, the other thing was that they took their money out of the inner city. They took their jobs out of the inner city, okay? This was the start of not only white flight physically in terms of life and lifestyle, people running away from the encroachment of blacks coming into the neighborhood, but this was also the start, and you can see this around the country in different cities, Detroit, Chicago, LA, other places, where ghettos expanded and shifted. They moved from where they were originally in central cities, further out, and even out into the suburbs, to today in 2009, we have suburban communities that are all black in this country, all over the country, okay, that have heretofore been either all white, affluent suburbs or mixed race suburbs, okay? A lot of this has gone away. So basically, the rich and the powerful gave up on the city, and they basically said, let the blacks have it. But you know what? We won't give them nothing to work with. So they also took their money, their tax base, their industry, everything out. So the grocery stores left, the businesses that you previously got jobs in, if you got a job, they left. Anywhere that you could have any kind of commerce or any kind of way to build a life, that began to leave the inner cities of Black America and America in general. So then you saw the election of Carl Stokes in Cleveland, Coleman Young in Detroit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This was the opening for blacks in elective office and government all over the country. So the roots of Barack Obama's election go back to the mid-60s and that whole concept of they gave up on the city. Guess what? There's some people in this country who just recently gave up on America. If you look at it very closely, over the last 25, 30 years, manufacturing jobs have left this country for a variety of reasons, one of which is cheaper labor. It's easier to build a car, a Ford or a GM car in Mexico when you pay a worker $5.24 an hour with no retirement, no benefits, and no health care than it is to locate in a major urban area where you already have an educated workforce, at least to the fact that there are benefits, there are good wage jobs, that they do have and deserve a right to some health care and some retirement plans. Okay? We're too hip, we're too wise, we're too smart. As General Motors is going down the tube, a lot of people didn't tell you when they gave them that $700 bailout before Bush left office, when they did that with the car companies. It wasn't $700 for them, that was the banks. The car companies got something less than that they are right now completing an assembly plant in Russia. General Motors has assembly in Russia. The real impact of Barack Obama's election to president, it is a great thing for African American children, for African American people, for other people who are concerned about peace, concerned about justice, concerned about race relations, because it marks a paradigm shift in this country where people can, now we know there are some people that will recognize someone for the quality of human being they are, the person they are, their education, their ability, okay? Barack Obama has 2 Ivy League educations, Columbia and Harvard. He has this tremendous track record in terms of his public service. And all of that has been recognized in this election. But as you can see during the first 6 months of this administration, despite what has been promulgated in his campaign, Hillary Clinton's campaign, and other campaigns about change in this country, we are A, still in Iraq, B, we are still present in Afghanistan and have sent 17,000 more troops to Afghanistan. We have decided not to shut down Guantanamo Bay. We have decided not to release pictures of tortured prisoners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we need to understand, there's some things bigger than the president, okay? It don't matter what color, what sex, what sexual orientation she or he is. There are some things in this country that are bigger than them. Is the civil rights movement dead? I say it's on life support. Yes?
Before we go off of that, because I'd like to puzzle this out just a little bit, Greg. Mm-hmm. Because I hear what you're saying about the 60s and when Coleman Young and Harold Washington, got elected.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back, I'm sort of a student of history and trying to understand these things. And the white flight that you described, like that is, I completely understand that. But there is a paradigm shift when white folks voted for an African American for president.
I'm getting to that. Okay. I'm getting to that, and I want you to understand that I just alluded to that. There is a paradigm shift when white folks, vote for an African American for president, because a lot of people are saying they couldn't conceive of them doing this before. But, you know, Obama has a special magic. Let's be real about it. You know, he has charisma. And for the first time in about, say, 40 years or 45 years, almost 50 years, you actually have a presidential candidate who has tons and tons of charisma. So his magic transcended race, his charisma transcended race, his message transcended race. And what a lot of white people said, you know, I think I can do this. If any time it's going to happen, I think I can vote. But there had been a growing cadre of people who began to get used to voting for blacks in office. Growing cadre of whites. Now, there's still some demographic differences that whites usually vote for white candidates and blacks usually vote for black and white candidates. But there had been a growing number of people that could see themselves voting for black candidates. To give you an example, Willie Brown was elected in San Francisco to be mayor, and in San Francisco, as you probably know, is only about 7–8% black population. Multicultural city, but it has a small number in terms of the population of African Americans. The myth of a post-racial America, I'm going to get to that in the presentation. Trust me, we are not past being involved and engaged in this dialogue, or let's say this non-dialogue about race in this country, because we haven't even started talking about this. We've been around the edges of it. We usually come to places of conversation about it when we have crisis, flashpoints. Somebody burns a cross in the lawn. Somebody is attacking black students or black children. This is stuff that's happened in this state recently in this community. North Eugene High School, okay? All right, just a few months ago in February, 3 white, two parents, one was a brother of a student, went and randomly attacked the first black people they saw when they walked on North Eugene's campus. And this was because of a fight between their child and another student, an African-American student. They weren't even going after the student that, you know, was involved in the conflict with their child. They went for the first thing they saw that was black. So if you think we've evolved that far, trust me, we haven't. We still got a lot of stuff to work out. What is the status of the racial divide? We're going to get to that too. And then get into our organization real quick. So we got this. Okay, let me give you what I call our racial credit score in America. Okay? And I'm going to begin at the top. I give whites a score out of 1,000, 750. Okay? The reason why I do that is because I take off 100 points for poverty. There is a significant number of our white population that is involved in poverty, who have been discriminated against on a variety of bases. I take another 100 points off for sex, because traditionally white women are paid less than white men, have, you know, less of a healthy lifestyle than white men. So we subtract that, we get down to 800, and then 50 points for other miscellaneous crap. Asians, they get 550 on my scale. And I have a little note on there. Please note that Asians have attained provisional white status in recent times. There has been a movement, and this goes over history, for particularly white racists to expand their population or try to bring in other groups that before they had hated, you know, as acceptable. I'll give you this. In the early 1900s, Catholics were a specific target, particularly in this community, of the KKK. Over time, the KKK evolved to embrace Catholics, because guess what? They were seeing that their numbers, white numbers, were dwindling. So they decided to bring in white Catholics to the KKK movement. I'm not saying that about Asians, but in this country, race goes along basically 2 lines. Either you're black or you're white, or you are provisionally white or provisionally black. Thus the red line, okay? Honorary white status is everything above that line, okay? So you have Asians, I give them a 550 on this scale. Latino, non-black, okay? If you look white enough, if your appearance is white enough and you are Latino and you don't exhibit those traits of your ethnicity, like, you know, speaking the language on a regular basis, trying to assimilate into the general culture, this is all things that happen. Do you know when Latinos became non-white? 1972. You know who made them non-white? Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon created a category called Hispanic. Okay? Latinos are not a race, they are an ethnicity, and they are ethnicities of different categories. So you have Puerto Ricans, Central Americans, South Americans, Mexicans, Cubans, and they cross the scale of race. So you have them from black to mixed race to basically white. And then you have in the middle, you have the Indians that are incorporated, integrated in that. And so there are whole racial dynamics about that in other parts of the Western Hemisphere. But for our case, it's, you know, this is what it is, Latino, non-black. Native Americans, 400. And they make it over the line just a little bit. And because I have a litmus test for this, and I've talked to other black scholars about this, white folks are a lot more comfortable in claiming their Native American heritage and or entering in sexual or marital relationships with Asians, Latino non-blacks, or Native Americans than they are blacks. It's more acceptable. You see this around on the West Coast all the time. Yes. And in the East too, some.
Okay, I hear you addressing perceptions of white people, and yet I'm sort of concerned here because what I know of the demographics for a lot of Native Americans is there are a lot of people who are really suffering. I know there's also...
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people are on the res. A lot of people aren't, yet they are suffering. But in terms of, I'm giving you the white perception on this little bit of Kool-Aid here, you know, if you are a white male in this country, in this society, you are the father of provisionally white female daughters, usually they'll be more apt to allow you to go out with and possibly marry a Native American, maybe a Latino, more likely Asians, before you ever get to blacks. Black is usually the stopping point where folks say, don't bring them home. I've had kids, young girls, teenagers tell me that their fathers have told them specifically, do not bring home a black boy, do not pollute the family tree. Okay? And other various things of that nature. Mixed race, black and white. This is where Obama fits in. Obama wasn't a rich, affluent person, okay? Not by any stretch of the imagination. You know, his mother basically was a poor single woman who, you know, took him literally around the world, but, you know, she did not have the resources that, you know, most other whites did. And she really crossed a big line in 1960 because her marriage would have been illegal in at least 17 states in this country at that time. So basically, you know, if Barack Obama had been born in Atlanta or in Birmingham, Alabama, instead of, you know, Hawaii, he would have basically been illegal and outcast. He was being a miscegenated child. And blacks have 300 on the scale. I give our blacks 300 because, you know what? There's a lot of reasons why we're still treated as 3/5 of a human being. This is a comparison. This is the Urban League's Equality Index. White America gets a 1.0 on the index as the beginning of this barometer. Black America, total equality, is running about 0.73 of white America. So the space between where we are and catching up with white America and black America has a 27-point differential. Okay, I'll get into this a little bit more. Economics, we're still struggling with economics. We're at 30% of the norm, quote unquote. We still make less money than whites per capita. We still save less money. We still own less property. We are still involved in a high rate of poverty. At least 1/3 of the African American population of 41 million people, 12.7% of this country, lives in poverty, below the poverty line. And we aren't even counting the ones who have dropped out of the poverty equation. There's a whole subset of people, black, white, and other, who have dropped below this. Healthcare, 0.25. We're about the sickest people in this country. Diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, cancer, AIDS. The highest rate of AIDS, of HIV infection right now in this country is among black women in the South. This is no longer a gay and drug abuse disease, okay? This is a disease of everybody because most of these women are heterosexual. Education, we're way behind on education, and the social justice quotient, we're still at about 10%. Civic engagement, you know, even though Barack Obama is president of the United States now, we're still not as civically engaged in the conversation of American, you know, power structure and struggle as we should be. Okay, some things never change. I'm giving you kind of a recent barometer to kind of give you a reality check about what's going on in America. October 1989, Boston. Some of you may remember, Charles Stewart and his pregnant wife are carjacked by a quote-unquote black man with a raspy voice. Stewart's wife and unborn child are murdered by Stewart himself. It later came out after Charles Stewart decided to commit suicide that there was no black man with a raspy voice, that he had staged and fabricated the whole incident in order to murder his wife and unborn child for the insurance money because he was in financial trouble. October 1994, Union, South Carolina. Susan Smith and her 2 toddlers are carjacked by a quote-unquote black man. Smith manages to escape. Smith's 2 children are later found at the bottom of a nearby lake. Susan Smith, this was all over the country, all over the news, said that she was carjacked by a black man and that her 2 children were strapped in the car seat. She managed to escape them, and these black men ran off, or this black man ran off with her 2 toddler children, her 2 sons. You know, there was a nationwide alert. There were people stopped from Miami to Seattle, black males looking for Susan Smith's 2 children, who at that time were at the bottom of a lake in South Carolina because their mother had drove them into a lake because her boyfriend at the time said that he didn't want to have a woman with kids. She's now in prison. May 2009, Philadelphia. That is basically a couple of days ago, beginning of this week. Bonnie Sweeten and her 9-year-old daughter are carjacked and kidnapped by 2 black men now, driving a black 1990s vintage black Cadillac. Sweeten and her daughter are later found, as of Thursday, at Disney World in Florida unharmed. So as you can see, there is still something deeply psychological in the minds of white Americans about the boogeyman. And the boogeyman is me. Black men, black people. All you got to do is say black male, and this country goes absolutely berserk. Okay? Absolutely berserk, because the image of black men is basically that we are violent, that we are criminals, that we engage in criminal activity. All of those stereotypes pop up. Nobody talks about the white guy who's the police officer who's been married to 4 different women and is suspected of killing at least 3 of them. Okay? Drew Peterson. He's a rock star, basically, with, you know, CNN, Fox, and all the rest of them. It's like, how can this guy get it? Trust me, there will be movies, stories, all of this will come out. Let's say the current state of black America. We're going to get into where we are: healthcare, public education, justice system, community policing, affordable housing, economic justice, and prosperity. These 6 areas are critical because this is a peace conference. And as was said many years ago, when white America catches a cold, black America catches pneumonia. We are in the state of the latter stages of pneumonia in this country as a group, as a racial ethnic group in this culture, because the gap in all of these areas is ever increasingly widening. What will happen is this will be the recipe for a major racial confrontation and meltdown in this country. So if you want to see that peace will not occur in your lifetime, my lifetime, our children, our grandchildren's lifetime, allow this to keep happening, okay? It's not just a black problem. This is not a black thing. This is an American thing. But we start where we have the most to lose, and that is in the black community. Again, we go environmental justice, the racial digital divide. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll do some breakout sessions, creative strategies and solutions for peace. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but I want to go through these slides real quickly. We'll break out by issue. We're going to break out by race. And we're going to answer some questions. What should black people do? What should white people do? What should America do? One thing about Barack Obama that we all need to keep in the front of our minds is he is the president of the United States. He is not the president of black America. He is the leader of basically the free world in Western civilization. So thus, he has some other things on his agenda besides the state of black America. And this has been pointed out by black leadership all over the country. You know, case in point, the vast majority of Congress people in this last election, black congressmen, the 45 black congressmen and women that are in Congress, other than Barack Obama, Barbara Lee of California was the only one to endorse him in the primary, the only one. Everybody else went with Hillary Clinton. Why do you think that is the case? One is jealousy, but the other thing is these people kind of had the feeling and knew that Barack Obama was not going to be able to live up to all the expectations of black America. We'll do breakout sessions, reports, discussions, some Q&A, and wrap up. And please feel free to interrupt me as we go along on this and ask questions, because I want this to be much more of a dialogue. Issue 1, healthcare. Black infants are nearly 2.5 times more likely than white infants to die before their first birthday. That is as of 2007. All of these statistics as of maybe about 18 months ago. Of all men ages 20 and older, 36.4% of African Americans have high blood pressure compared to 25.6% of white men. We're dying earlier, we're dying faster, we're dying because we have high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, hypertension, stress, depression, you name it. We got it, and we got it in spades. Black women are close to 80% more likely to die of a stroke than white women, and 30% more likely to die of a heart attack. My mother died of a heart attack. African Americans with diabetes, I have diabetes, have a 27% higher death rate than whites with the disease. You know why? Why do you think that's the case? Because we don't have doctors and we don't get adequate health care. Most whites in this country have a regular physician. Most blacks don't. They don't.
What about access to healthier food?
Oh, I'm getting to that too. There's all the supermarkets left the ghetto years ago. My mother always had to get on the bus and go out to the suburbs in Cleveland to get the better food because the market up the street was a bunch of crap. Okay? But if you got cockroaches on the floor, you're not taking your dollars into that place to buy food to bring home to your babies. Ain't gonna happen. So you go outside of your community to do that. Black women are diagnosed with AIDS at a rate 25 times that of white women. Nearly 1/3, 32% of African Americans do not have a regular doctor. Again, you know, 1/3 of our population doesn't even have a regular. Most of them don't even see a doctor till they get sick, or too sick to be, treated by that. That happened to my father when he died of cancer. He didn't go see a doctor until a year before he passed away. Close to 1.8 million African American children in the United States do not have health insurance. Okay? Our population in this country is 41 million people. Okay? If you slice that down and dice that and say that at least 1/3 of those people are under the age of 18 are children, that's a significant number of kids that don't have health insurance. Okay? Nationally, half of all black neighborhoods lack access to a full-service grocery or supermarket. Again, when you guys catch a cold, when you don't have that contact, when you have the same problems that we do, multiply that several times over and you get a black person's experience in America. 71% of African Americans across the United States live in counties that violate federal air pollution standards, compared to 58% of white Americans. Most of us live near factories and toxic waste dumps. Fact. They put the worst polluters in ghettos and barrios in America. And they still are there. You go to New Orleans, people in New Orleans are disproportionately affected by the environment and the trashing of the environment. There's an environmental justice movement that most of you don't know anything about that is totally black in various parts of this country. But nobody knows about that because the environmental movement has been almost exclusively white. Blacks don't matter, so they shouldn't be involved in environmentalism. However, we're getting the worst end of the stick. Okay? Public education, issue number 2. Early childhood education is key to school readiness and sustained academic achievement. Yet, at age 3, only 45% of African American children are enrolled. At the age of 4, just 73% are registered in preschool or Head Start. Just 12% of African American 4th graders have reached proficiency or advanced reading levels, while 61% have yet to reach the basic level. Do you realize that at 3rd grade, there are people who are in the prison industrial academia complex in this country who are already targeting illiterate 3rd grade black children for admission to the prison academy. They know they're going to jail. If you can't read by 3rd grade, at the basic 3rd grade level, they predict that most of those children, particularly the males, will be locked up by the time they're 18. While 9% of white students have repeated a grade, twice as many, or 18% of black students, have been held back at least once. 1 out of 3 African American students in the 7th through 12th grades has been suspended or expelled at some point. as opposed to 15% of white children. That happens in this town all the time, despite the fact that we have a black superintendent for 4J school district. According to the most recent statistics, the nationwide college graduation rate for enrolled black students is only 40% compared to 61% of enrolled white students. Now, I'm not making this up. This is all facts that have been out there. The justice system, of the 2.1 million inmates today, 910,000, almost a million, are black. Blacks make up 43.9% of the state and federal prison populations, but only 12.3% of the U.S. population. We are overrepresented in this population. Do the math. Just do the math. If you had that many white people locked up, I'm going to tell you something. No other civilized, industrialized country on this planet has the prison population the United States does. They don't.
I heard it was no other country, period.
You probably are right about that. I know that of the affluent ones, there's no comparison.
Right, in the poor countries, it costs too much to lock up a lot of people. So.
16, I'll give you another piece that's not on here. 16% of the prison population is Latino, okay? And maybe another 5 or 6% is like Native American. So the majority of people who are locked up in prison are people of color. 1 of every 3 black males today can expect to go to prison in his lifetime. True fact. It's happening as we speak. 1.4 million African American men, or 13%, have currently or permanently lost their right to vote as a result of felony conviction, 7 times the national average. On any given day, 1 of every 14 black children has a parent in prison. If you think we have a threat to peace in this country, think about that statistic. If your mother or father is locked up in prison, what are your chances of making it in America? And aren't you going to be pissed off? Community policing, a big issue we have around here. Across the U.S., over 10% of black drivers stopped by the police were likely to be searched or have their vehicles searched, as opposed to 3.5% of white drivers stopped by the police. There are reported 72 citizen oversight boards across the country. We have one in Eugene now. Controversial, but we have one. But close to 13,500 state and local law enforcement agencies. That means the vast majority of police in this country are not overseen or monitored by the citizens that pay them. Okay? Another recipe for conflict and disaster. Less than 0.5% of the police departments are monitored by the community. Of the 4,318 incidents of police violence on African Americans, 3,622, or 84%, were committed by white officers. Are we in a post-racial America? Yes, you had a question. Scratch it. Think about that. Where is the next LA uprising coming from? Where is the next Rodney King coming from? And how bad will this be? Affordable housing. 75% of citizens who receive welfare in central cities or rural areas, 66% of entry-level job growth is in the suburbs. Remember I talked about earlier, jobs left the inner city when whites left the inner city? They left it. African Americans have the lowest home ownership rate in the nation at 49% compared to 76% for whites. As we know, the economy bottom has fallen out. So both of those numbers, white home ownership has dropped and even black home ownership has dropped even more. Matter of fact, there's a statistic out right now that in Prince George's County, Maryland, the most affluent black county in the country, there were people walking away from their homes at a rate of 53% in the last 2 years. Okay? Couldn't afford the mortgage, first, second, or third, that they've been conned into taking. African Americans make approximately 6 times more trips by public transit than whites. I'm on the board of Lane Transit District, so I know what these stats are. I see them all the time. The poor whites, Latinos, African Americans, Native Americans, the dispossessed, you know, our Mercedes of choice is a 40-foot bus, okay, or a rail car. Blacks and Latinos together comprise 54% of public transit users. 62% of all bus riders are black or Latino. Only 12% of the U.S. Department's $60 billion budget goes to public transit. Actually, it's $56 billion right now. I know that statistic in my head because I worked on this last authorization bill in Washington, D.C. While nearly 60% is spent on highways, which serve white suburban communities. If you want to talk about sprawl in this country, even in this community, that's an issue that we all have to grapple with. You know, we're still putting more money into concrete instead of putting more money into public transportation for everybody. Issue 6, economic justice and prosperity. The median weekly weekly wage earned by African American workers in 2004 was $523. For whites, it was $677 a week. 20 years ago, 1 in every 4 black workers was a union member. Now just 1 in 7 belongs to a union. Our rights are not being protected. Nobody's speaking up for us. Unions are disappearing. The unemployment rate for blacks nationwide is twice that for whites. Another statistic that's big on this, that's been there for years and years and years. African Americans have a median net worth of $5,998 compared to $88,651 for whites. 32% of African Americans have zero or negative net worth. What does that mean? That means 1/3 of black folks are living in poverty. We have no money. We don't even have bank accounts, okay? I mean, this is a really, you know, deplorable condition that is going to be the tinder and the gasoline for major racial unrest in this country. That's something that the election of Barack Obama cannot alone solve. What I'm going to point to is we need to collectively solve these issues, okay? We need to collectively solve these issues. Black folks, white folks, Latinos, these are American problems. As long as we have this level of gross disparity and schisms in our country, we're inviting disaster. We're inviting the collapse of the United States of America as you know it. Okay? And it isn't our fault. Fewer than 50% of black families own their own homes compared to more than 75% of whites. Issue 7, environmental justice, what I was talking about earlier. Black children are 5 times more likely than white children to have lead poisoning. Why? Because we live next to nasty-ass factories that pump that stuff out. Or the paint on the walls in our homes are lead-based. Or we have asbestos in the attic. Recent studies suggest that a young person's lead burden is linked to lower IQ, lower high school graduation rates, and increased delinquency. Nationally, 3 out of 5 African American and Latino Americans live in communities with abandoned toxic waste sites. What did you see in Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans? Okay? The 9th Ward is dotted with abandoned toxic manufacturing waste facilities. They have barrels where people have just walked off and just left them there because they went out of business and they never cleaned them up. All of that stuff got pumped to the surface when the levees broke. Okay? Katrina exposed a huge wound on the backside of America. And the color of that wound was black for the most part. Over 870,000 of the 1.9 million, 46% housing units for the poor, mostly minorities, sit within 1 mile of factories that reported toxic emissions to the EPA. White affluent people do not live next to toxic waste dumps. They don't. And this is the last issue, the racial digital divide. Nearly 51% of African Americans have access to a home computer, compared to 74.6% of whites. Only 40% of African Americans have access to the internet at home, compared to 67.3% of whites. Excuse me. 52.8% of African American children have access to a computer at home. Fully 85.5% of white children do. How far behind are black kids from white kids in school achievement? This is a critical part of the achievement gap in schools. And I call it not really the achievement gap, it's the preparation gap. Because if you cannot prepare to learn, you do not have the tools to learn, you can't even meet the achievement issues. Not going to happen. African Americans are at a disadvantage in terms of employment because on the job, 60% of all workers use a computer and 46% use the internet. For jobs that require a college degree, 85% of workers use a computer and 74% use the internet. For those with only a high school diploma, 43% use a computer at work and 27% use the internet. Source material, The Covenant with Black America, introduction by Tavis Smiley. Now that's the gloom and doom part, okay, folks? In Tavis's book, there are a series of essays that address all of these issues and then a couple of more. But they also address the specific remedies to these problems, what we have to collectively do to begin to address these major schisms in our country, these huge divides. Okay? So now we're going to take a little bit of time. We're going to do, does anybody need a break real quick? Okay. All right, we'll keep rolling then. The Peace Challenge exercise. Usually I have a few more people in the room than what we have here, but we'll modify this right now. This is a challenge that I designed to promote critical thinking, empower participants to solve issues with peace as the primary goal, address real issues and current problems, and promote dialogue. So what we are going to do is this. We have basically one group here, so I'm going to ask everybody to kind of get together on one side of the room over here. All group members will have an individual role to play, assignments. Each person shall approach the issue from the perspective of the role they are assigned. Okay? So, I think I have just the right number of people too. I'm real close to it. Issues will be addressed in the following format. You will create a vision statement for the issue or the problem that we're addressing, articulate a set of values, principles to guide your decision making, determine at least 3 objectives, 3 things you want to achieve to reach that goal of the vision, design a strategy to address the issues, and finally put it all together in a proposed solution. That's what you're going to do. You're crafting a solution to these. Okay? The roles, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I've got 6 plus a scribe. Okay? We're right on the mark here. So someone will have the role of the President of the United States, Someone will be the governor of a state. Someone will be the mayor of a city. Someone will be a business leader. Someone will be a white community leader. Someone will be a black community leader. And you can kind of shape these roles even differently. You know, grassroots community leadership in general, that kind of thing. However you want to position yourself in this. Who is the mayor?
I guess I'm there.
All right. And then we have business leader. Who's my business leader? You're my business leader. And who are our two community activists? Okay? You're going to be our white activist, and now you're our black activist. All right?
Cool.
So here is the situation. I'm going to give you a choice of scenarios in the 8 ones that we went through in this exercise. So don't all jump on it. Do we want to address healthcare, public education, the justice system, community policing, affordable housing, economic justice, environmental justice, or the racial digital divide? What is the consensus of the group? What are the hot issues that you're thinking is that you're personally really concerned about, and B, what do you think is probably the hottest issue or the most pressing issue in this country that needs to be addressed? We have to craft a peace strategy to solve this. So,
Well, I would suggest that given the fact that there is a commission now on healthcare and there's a lot of organizing around it, I just would suggest
Healthcare?
that healthcare would be a good one, but if somebody else
How
has
do other
some
people
other
feel?
issue.
That's a big one.
It's a big one.
all of these are big.
Yeah, they're all big. How about justice system?
Justice
I'll
system.
defer if you'd rather do that, so.
Okay.
I'm just putting it out there as a possibility.
So we have healthcare and justice system on the table. What is the consensus of the group? Anybody else have any other
I agree
suggestions?
on both of those as main topics that we should focus on.
Okay.
Obviously, they're all main topics, but I think that healthcare and environmental justices are good starting points.
How many want to address healthcare? Raise your hands. 1, 2,
Oh, sure.
3. How many want to 4? Okay, that's it. We're going
Okay,
with
healthcare.
healthcare.
That's
Is that all
good.
right with you?
Okay.
Yeah.
So healthcare, okay? So what is your vision for healthcare? Let's talk about that first.
Now, Greg, are we
This is a
as
free-flowing
participants,
conversation.
or am I now to serve
No,
in my role?
You're all participants. Everybody in
No,
this.
no, I mean, like,
You
are you
get
asking
into your
David
role,
Cobb what
yes.
mine is, or David
You
Cobb
get
is
into
President of the
you
United
get into-
States?
You're President of the United States. You're in your roles now. From your perspective, what you gonna do about it? What are you gonna propose?
What my vision is?
And you're gonna have to, what I want out of this exercise is for everybody to work together to craft a policy, a strategy, a vision, a solution to this issue.
Okay, what I want is access at an affordable rate for everybody in my community and everybody.
So that's perspective from our black activist, Carol Van Houten over here. So access, you want access to affordable health care for everybody. That is a big.
Affordable and quality.
And quality, okay,
Yeah.
and quality. Does anybody else have any ideas around the vision?
Well, you're gonna use choice too, because that's the thing that people who don't want socialized medicine, go, well, I want to choose my doctor. So quality is one thing, but, that's the fear that a lot of people have, is that they're gonna be told.
Where to go and what to do.
Have a second thing.
Well, maybe not even that, but the people I hear who are for the insurance companies are
And
saying.
you're the governor.
Yeah. Oh, I'm the governor. Okay, and my, so I go to the president, it's like, my state has horrible health care, so I need, something, I don't know what state I am, it could be anyone.
Pick a state. I'll pick Louisiana. That's bad. It's bad enough down here.
Oh, it is bad.
It's horrible,
It's
okay?
the governor down there.
Bobby Jindal. I'll give you my editorial comment. The Indian who doesn't know he's an Indian. That's the Indian on the other side of the ocean. He's decided to become a white white man. An Indian's trying to get out of a white man's trying to get out of an Indian's body.
Okay, but I'm taking my own take on it because I'm not
Go
going to
ahead, go for
dismiss
it.
it. Okay, so I'm the governor, and so I hear the black activists saying that you want.
Thank you.
Oh, I do. I'm a good governor. That you want access, you want quality. You didn't say choice, but I'm and to that because my white constituents want choice. I'm betting. Do they? What do my white people?
What do you white people want?
What do you white people want?
Well, really, I feel we need to destroy the line of justice, and we need to include, I think, everyone's black, white, Indian. Everyone needs to be touched down on, and everyone needs to be heard.
So you're joining forces
Yeah.
with the black
Yeah,
activists.
we're-
That's
we're
good.
joining
I like
forces,
my
yeah.
statement. It's a mythical statement.
Other comments, other, visions for the vision.
Well, I'm not, since I don't know anything about Louisiana, I'll be mayor of
Mayor.
the city.
New Orleans, Baton Rouge.
Part of my vision is having healthcare facilities where people of all classes can reach them and not way the hell out in suburbia.
Access.
So, yes, access in neighborhoods or equally across class boundaries, and we're going in the wrong direction in this city.
Other comments, other feedback. We have access, affordability, quality, choice. So how do we craft that in a vision? I think that we can pull at least one or two sentences together to create that vision. Scribe, let's see what you can come up with. Yeah, let's give it a shot at it.
A society where all have equal choice and access to quality health care.
Quality,
Quality
affordable
is-
healthcare.
Quality and affordability are really important to me. We're left out here.
So as a business person, I have to suggest that there's a way to do this, and that is, we need and governor and president, sir, we need to make a law that every citizen is required to have health care. And no more of this nonsense about complaining that they're too poor. It could be deducted from their income. And, yes,
What if they
and
don't pay
no, it can be deducted from their income where they work. Say maybe they get a welfare check, it could be deducted from their welfare check, $200 welfare check, you might have to pay out $600, something like that. So if everyone has to pay and receive insurance, then not only will we have a healthy society, but we'll have a healthy financial situation as well.
So my business leader
Let me
is just.
kind of tweak you a little bit, business leader.
Yes, sir.
Most of the business leaders in this country will tell you that in this town too, that I don't want to pay for the poor. They won't say that out loud, but they don't want to have the burden of carrying the poor. And it's the people who have no access to health care usually go into emergency rooms to get their health care for free to them, but at a differential cost to the majority taxpayer, which usually is you, this business leader.
So I'm hearing you suggest mandating health insurance.
Mandated health insurance, it's
Mandated
the
health.
only way to do it.
So that's one of,
Mr. Mayor?
we're getting into our principles here, our values. Go ahead, other values.
I gotta say, I gotta take my mayor's hat off for a second and be who I am, which is a very poor person, and keep your laws off my body. I do not need anything coming from AMA, and you don't have a right to a penny of my hard-earned money to shovel into that. No, keep your laws off my butt. Because that's another perspective. I mean, access is one thing. Forcing it on people is fascist.
Don't you want your country to be prosperous?
I want, my
It's our
country's
businesses that
prosperity
create prosperity.
is to support our ability to live our lives.
So let me ask you something. What happens to poor black people, poor white people, poor people in general, when they don't have access to good, quality, affordable, health care? And what are the implications for your country, your state, your city, your business community, the black community, and the white community in general? What are those implications? How can we craft values amongst all of us? Give me at least three, four values that really get to the heart of that vision.
Well, to me, it's really important that everybody have access to that kind of health care. That's a value in our,
Access can be a value. It's
Access
it's in the mission statement of the vision, but access is definitely a value.
yeah.
And well, considering as for me, a poor college student now, I mean, an income tax on healthcare. I mean, I don't have insurance, and I mean, frankly, if I was sick tomorrow, I would stay home and not do anything about it. And I think there needs to be a way to be able to speak up for the people that don't actually have the money to, have proper health care. And even if they did, what would, even if they had a very minimal, they're not getting, good treatment in the first place. There needs to be something, for all of us.
Scribe,
Even
you're neutral in this. What's your opinion?
Well, the thing about healthcare is healthcare has to be rational. There's not enough, we can't possibly get all the healthcare we want. And the way we do it in this country is by who can pay. In other countries, we do it with time. You have to wait your turn in some sort of a queue. I don't know which is better, which is worse. But most countries do it with time. In England, you wait your turn on the list to get your operation. If you live long enough to get the operation, good for you. If you don't, you don't. It's sort of the way the Oregon Health Plan works. They rank particular treatments as to whether they're
Well,
worthy
but
or not.
isn't there a system that could work a lot with a lot of factors, not even just a factor of time and money, but also, anything that could go along with those. I can't think of much right now, but I'm sure there's thousands, that could all, in my mind, could be worked around some better, beneficial healthcare for us all. Something like that, there has to be, time, money, those are obviously two big things, but I think there's something as Americans we can do to
Well, we go back to the core issue now. We have a major schism here between the white majority community in this country and the black community in terms of access to affordable and quality health care. You have at least 1/3 of your people have little to no access to health care. So your question to everybody is, what's prompting you here, Carol? What are you gonna do about my folks? What are you gonna do about the people who right now can't afford it, can't get to it, don't even want to deal with it because they can't afford it?
And furthermore, a lot of the bad health in my community are things that could be prevented if there was good early intervention and preventative care. Not all of it, but that's clear. We need to have
Early intervention and
early
preventative
and
care,
preventative
that's a
care.
value.
And that's a value, and that would save the whole system money in the long run and do a whole lot for my community, because bad health just makes it more difficult to do everything else that one needs to do in life. The other thing is that I heard some talk about this idea of kind of like making it based on payroll or something like that. We already know what happens with Social Security and Medicare. Poor people pay disproportionately a lot more than wealthy people. I think that somehow we need to have some way that people can afford to pay more, are paying more for it, and because it comes down to me, it's a value that everybody has, and
Well,
that
how about-
everybody should pay for it.
There's something that you said in there that
Yeah.
really kind of resonated. and that is, you know, the affordability and the you know, the inequity between, because you're paying more. Actually, you know,
Me
black
and
people
other-
got to pay more for health care than
And
white
other
people.
poor white people too.
Yeah, poor white
Other
people.
but
So how do we resolve that
that needs to be
inequity?
resolved, yeah, in
Yeah.
some way.
Well,
It's more effective than equitable.
It strikes me that this is less of a racial healthcare delivery system than a poverty healthcare delivery system. The fact that blacks are poorer in general means they get less healthcare. It's not necessarily that there's a racial denial of healthcare, there's a racial denial of wealth.
Well, the data don't.
Hold up though. Think about this though. Wealth is a component of this, but race is also a major component. Who are the majority of people that are graduating from medical school?
That's true.
White doctors. White doctors are mostly not altruistic people. When they graduate from medical school, they have student loans, they have needs, they have all of this other kind of stuff. They want to start making money. You can't make money in the ghetto. There is no incentive, no attraction for you to ply your trade
But it's
in
still
the ghetto.
financial.
It's financial, but it's also racial. Why would I want to go into a crime-ridden, infested, impoverished neighborhood unless I'm Mother Teresa? Isn't it easier for me to, you know, do nose jobs for rich white women, or, you know, tummy tucks, or, you know, breast implants, or penis enlargements?
But again, I still think it's because money's there.
So I have a value that that healthcare become a service, not a way to make high income. That,
Would you see healthcare as a utility?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So let's look at healthcare as a utility.
How about,
Like your water, your lights, everything else. It's a
when
utility.
you write a utility, if we're going to go down that road, which I'm willing to entertain as president, what we would say is access to healthcare as a right,
Yeah.
as opposed to a
As a right.
commodity
That's
That you
great.
buy.
to be
Yeah,
bought
yeah,
and paid for.
yeah.
So,
Thank you, Mr. President.
well, I like the way you're, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you, Carol.
Yeah.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I have a lot of empathy for the situation. But the problem is that the reality is the insurance companies and the existing healthcare infrastructure operates in a certain way.
They
And I
discriminate
can't-
against us.
Yes, they do, and they also, honestly, like, I can show you the Federal Election Commission reports and show you how they donate to both Democrats and Republicans.
Mhm.
And I can show you how this actually operates. So Carol, in this closed room, I will tell you, you know, because when I became president, I read about Lyndon Baines Johnson and the conversation he had with Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to tell you right now, you've already convinced me of the need to make such change, but I'm going to tell you, you have to force me to do what is the right thing. Your arguments is not enough in the political reality. I can't go up against the
So it
insurance
sounds like
companies
you're
right
blaming
now.
the victim sort of here.
I'm telling you what political reality is.
Okay, so this is where we get to the rub here. Usually when that happens, okay, look at that dialogue and that dynamic, then black folks tend to shut down and it's off to your corners. We're going to war with the president, we're going to war with the mayor, we're going to war with the governor, because we know the only way that we can get your attention is to do it in a aggressive, public, and possibly violent manner. Then we will get a response. Now the question is, how do we work this out without having to go to riots?
Mr. President, we have the finest healthcare system in the whole world. We have experts in this country, in the medical industry and the insurance industry, who will handle this. Just,
And this is what you're getting, along with a check.
Indeed.
Actually, you have a healthcare system that has just about broken our economy, where resources are being wasted every day treating people who, had they sought treatment early, their treatment would have been cheap, fast, and successful, and now we're wasting a lot of money on last-minute treatment, and people die anyway because they waited too long. We could save a whole hell of a lot of money and treat each other and ourselves a whole lot better taking care of it.
We're not going to solve this right now. Usually what I do is this exercise is designed to go for a little bit longer than this, and I went overtime in my presentation, so I apologize for that. But I want to thank you for participating in this exercise and in this workshop. Stan flashed me that I had less than 5 minutes left to wrap this up. If you could please fill out your evaluation form, give some feedback on how you enjoyed or didn't enjoy this exercise and this information. Please, give me your constructive criticism. I read a book recently where this guy says there's no such thing as constructive criticism. You construct or you criticize, which means you tear down. So, I don't mind being torn down. So please feel free to do that, because that way I'm going to be able to get better at this, is to do that. I've done a lot of these over the years, but this is kind of the second time that I've kind of gone through this particular workshop exercise. So you're still my guinea pigs on how we're going to kind of get this done right. But if we had gone through the full exercise, the idea was to come up with a strategy, a peaceful way that we can resolve these issues. And basically everybody around this circle has got to give something. Okay, everybody's got to give something up. The business leader, the community leader, the black leader, the politicians, everybody's got to give something up for us to get to some kind of semblance of a peaceful resolution to this, and a way for us to begin approaching this in a way that will be healthy for everybody. See, part of the problem with our country is, and even in our community, even in this community, the people who start throwing rocks at each other never get in the same room with each other. Okay? We are so polarized by our positions that we don't have the wherewithal to be able to sit in a room across from one person or another and be able to have a healthy conversation. I point to one thing that's happened in this community, the West Eugene Collaborative, where that is a model for something that has gone really right with a collaborative process to come to some conclusion agreement. I had a chance to engage that as an LTD board member and get a report back, and so people like Jim Welsh and Rob Zako were actually talking to each other, which is amazing, and agreeing. They found points of agreement, and they were able to craft a vision for West Eugene transportation that I think is workable for everybody. So if they can do that and sit in the room together over 2 years and do stuff like that, I think that the environmental community, the black community, the healthcare community, the seniors, the business community, everybody right now should be able to come together in a room over an extended period of time and begin to significantly work through some resolution to these issues. Does anybody have any other questions or concerns? Yes.
I'm a little frustrated because we really did only do like 25 minutes on the exercise, and it's an exercise of at least an hour for this to evolve. And I'm wondering if there's going to be other opportunities to take up something like this.
Well, I plan to do this again at some point. I was given 90 minutes of this, and a lot of times just kind of delving into this material, I just get to the point where I really think that everybody should be exposed to these issues in a comprehensive format, because again, we hear these statistics out at random in the news and this kind of thing. But when you bring them all together, like this, in this kind of way, and you see the effect of all 8 of these issues on a community, it is a powerful thing. And all of a sudden you say, oh shit.
Where do you start?
Yeah, where do you start? But we have to start somewhere, because guess what? If we don't start on these issues and we don't start working collectively around these issues, you know, we're gonna be locking our doors, putting up bars, and getting underneath the bed to keep our head down from the bullets. Yes.
Something I'm just gonna throw the pebble in the pond. We did this work session, God, I think it was just last weekend, no, 2 weeks ago with Johnny Lake. And one of the first things we realized is that, well, actually, yeah, there were a couple racial incidents that were the precipitating issues, but what we really needed to look at was what is a system of privileges to be apportioned that motivate this, you know, the racism, sexism, whatever.
Well, what we need to do is look at, I think Beth addresses this in her workshops, the invisible or visible in a lot of cases system of privileges and entitlements that are handed out in this country that we don't even realize that we have. And so that's an incredible dividing line that is here, because when one group of people can walk in and expect to have good education, expect to get excellent health care, expect to get, you know, high quality transportation, go where I want to go as fast as I want to go and get there, and you, damn it, you better build the road for me to get there on it, then you have, you know, some things that we got to work out. So some people have to understand that, you know, entitlements don't belong to a few people. There are certain things in this country that everybody should be entitled to. So I want to thank you for your participation, attending the workshop today, and please turn in your evaluations. Thanks.